let's get into the big topic of open source, something that we actually
And
say at Red Hat.
sometimes we haven't
This
shipped
is so
we
awesome.
are an open culture that believes
actually
in
a big
importance of
piece
What is that process that a developer, or let's say a
As
new
the
developer,
Kubernetes ecosystem really boomed,
Hello and welcome to this week's Ask an OpenShift Administrator Office Hours live stream. I am Andrew Sullivan, and I am joined, as always, by my co-host, Mr. Johnny Rickard. How are you today, Johnny?
I'm hanging in there, man. How are you?
I'm good. You know, we were chatting beforehand and all of that, and I kept getting a little cough, and it occurred to me that just like in the before times when we would travel, I was at a conference last week. I'm really hoping that with all the precautions of hand sanitizer and theoretically we're all very COVID conscious, right? Hopefully, I can avoid the normal sinus infection. It was funny because I think I've said before, like it used to be whenever I would pack a bag, I always have a first aid kit with me that has all the normal band-aids and all their stuff. But then I had another little pouch that always has like what would be considered an unhealthy and unnatural amount of decongestants and cold medicine and stuff like that because
Oh yeah.
it's inevitable, right? You always get some sort of head cold or something like that after traveling. So, and
Yeah.
Christian, I never left. At least I don't think I did. Did I miss a week? I
No.
mean, I'm back home. I guess California was beautiful, but there's no place like home.
Always. Yeah, dude, when I was on the road, I used to run around with Dayquil all the time. Like that was my go-to just so I could if I had a runny nose or something like that was going on just from being on the plane, just the stale air
Yeah.
and then all the other humans.
Yeah.
Yeah, I lived off of Dayquil and Zyrtec on the road.
Yeah, other humans are the worst. They're just the worst.
Animals.
So yeah, it as I said last week, it was good to be back out in the world. Good to get back to a conference and see other people, and it's people you haven't seen in literally years in some cases. So that was really nice. But at the same time, I was gone for 8 days because I stayed in the weekend to be a tourist and all that other stuff, and that is the longest I've been away from home in 2.5 years, and that was kind of strange, to say the
Nice.
least. So
You have a good weekend though? Get to walk around, get to see some new things?
yeah, I did. I've been to San Francisco, gosh, I don't know, like 10 times, maybe more,
Mhm.
for conferences and all that other stuff over the years. And I've never been a tourist. I've never even ridden road, been on, whatever.
Redododon?
I speak two languages, bad English and terrible English. I'd never been on the trolley. So, I actually got to get on the trolley, and my wife was there. We walked through all of the Golden Gate Park and Land's End and all that other stuff. It was great.
That's
I'm
awesome. Yeah, I went
my,
to New York once, and I was like, "Oh, I'm gonna ride the subway," and then I rode the subway, and I was like, "I don't ever want to ride the subway again."
you don't want to have epic sword fights with the rats down there or anything?
Oh, 5,000 of my closest friends were in the same compartment as I was, so that's when you're in there like this for like an hour and a half, it's not that much fun.
Oh yeah. Many fond memories of riding the New York City subway. Yeah, Christian, tech exchange tour, Orlando, Korea, and no, it wasn't Amsterdam. It was Vienna, Austria. So yeah, I did. That was the last major trip that I did. We did an around the world, Raleigh to Seoul to Vienna to Orlando to Raleigh, and it was painful. I mean, so Seoul's beautiful and amazing, and Vienna is
Hmm.
one of my favorite cities. But gosh, it's so hard to be away from home for that long.
Yeah, that's a long time.
Yeah. So, anyways, enough of me randomly babbling. The only other thing that I'll say, because I've been telling quite literally everyone, because I'm just so incredibly proud and happy, is so I think I mentioned here on the stream, my wife is she's a burn trainer, right? Burn boot camp trainer. She was doing the athletes games regionals. Well, she actually made finals. So I'm like
Oh,
literally everybody. I mean, I'm like random people in the grocery store. I'm like, oh, Burn Boot Camp here in town? Yeah, my wife made finals. Yeah, So, anyways, yeah, I'm so proud of my wife. She made finals, so she's one of the top 16. We'll be going to Charlotte here in 3 weeks, I guess, to do that whole thing. It's like a whole weekend of just. She was reading off all these exercises to me yesterday, and like one workout would be enough to probably kill me. Like, let's face
Yeah,
it, I'm a desk jockey, right?
yeah.
So she's reading off, and there's like 8 workouts, and all of them are just hard. Each one is progressively harder to the end. Where I'm just, like, how do you people survive? I don't know how this works.
So is it kind of like CrossFit? Well, first of all, congratulations to your wife. That's awesome. It's awesome to see like where you can work out and train and do all these things and then go and be successful at it. So congratulations to her and to you since you get to brag about it.
Yeah.
Is it kind of like CrossFit or is it a little bit?
Similar in concept, right? In that it's a gym and they have a philosophy and all that, but not CrossFit. It's I don't even know how to describe it.
Okay.
So, but yeah, they focus on the whole full body fitness and all that other stuff. I should really participate. It'd probably do me some good.
Yeah. Same. Same.
I have gone to a couple of their workouts. It nearly killed me. It's not like 20 years ago, right, when I was much younger and in much better shape. Anyways, enough lamenting about old times and celebrating new things. So today's topic is something that I think is near and dear to all of our hearts. It's something that, honestly, until I joined Red Hat, until I thought about it a couple of years ago, and I was doing a presentation with Lucy Kerner on DevSecOps, and it first got brought up. Um, the software supply chain, right? So we don't think about it very often, unless usually we hear some sort of news story about. There was one where there was a bunch of npm modules that got, somebody committed code that contained malware, or there was another guy who he got upset, so he just pulled his module or something like that, and it broke a whole slew of software and all that type of stuff. We don't really think about where the things, the modules, the libraries, the things that our software that we're creating that our business depends on, the things that it depends on and where they come from, unless there's an issue. So I'll say the story of getting to this stream has been an interesting one. I know software supply chain security has been a topic that has been top of mind for Red Hat and for a number of other organizations recently. But for me, this came about because one of the folks on my team is working on a software supply chain security solution pattern. And your team has been working on software supply chain security, and it just so happened that we figured out who the person in Red Hat is that we should really talk to about this, and that is today's guest. So that is E81. So Emmy, welcome. Thank you for joining us today.
Yeah, hi.
If you don't
Thanks.
mind introducing yourself.
Yeah, I'm E80. Let's see here. I am the senior manager for our product security organization software supply chain group. So what that means is I'm focused on the supply chain security internal to Red Hat and how we productize and release all of our offerings. Anything that has to do with modifying, storing, and shipping code falls into my realm. Let's see here. There's a lot of folks throughout Red Hat that are focused on supply chain security, whether for our customers, whether for internal usage. But my team's is pretty narrowly focused on our engineering supply chain.
Yeah, it's funny because I say funny. I say funny ironically, I think. Again, we don't often think about it. And I was sitting with I don't know, one of the RHEL engineers one time. Actually, I think it was probably at Tech Exchange that Christian was just referring to. So for anybody who doesn't know, Tech Exchange is Red Hat's internal technical enablement event. So all of our technical field folks, everybody gets together and basically we all learn things. So I was talking with one of them about, like all the security stuff that we do to make, RHEL different than CentOS or OpenShift different than OKD. And, even though it's all the same bits in many instances, there's different compile flags and all kinds of other stuff that really make Red Hat software, I won't say unique, but make it into
Mm-hmm.
the product that it is. So it was one of those things that was very eye-opening to me because I was never, what I was told is, oh yeah, this is part of our like security presentation that we do. Like when people ask us these questions, we talk about these things. And it occurred to me that I've never been a part of one of those conversations. Even as a
Mm,
customer, it was always we just use RHEL, and you use RHEL
yeah.
because RHEL is the best, and that's what we do. And so nobody ever had to sell us on it because, well, a decade ago or however long it was, Johnny, you remember, somebody already made that decision for us.
Indeed.
Well, and supply chain security is so I've been in cybersecurity for different like ways since about 2013. And supply chain security was always that thing that I equate it to cleaning your bedroom, like a teenager cleaning his bedroom. And the supply chain security is all that stuff that's under your bed, like you can smell the milkshake that's under there. But in like whatever protein shake we're talking about working out, it's under there. But you're like, I just don't want to clean it up right now. And so it's like this aspect of security that no one really wants to think about because it's difficult and it makes people like you have to hold everybody involved in the engineering process accountable for every single decision they make. Like you want to push a feature out and just stand up a random system, there's going to be a lot of implications with that. And to face those implications is like it's a whole beast, right? And so that's
Yeah.
and now it also hadn't been exploited heavily. It's always exploited, but in the last, I think Sonatype did like a graph, and they said that there's been a 650% increase from 2020 to 2021 in supply chain specific attacks, and it just keeps going up. Like you just Google supply chain security breaches, and it's constant. I mean, the idea that you don't have to attack the end user, you can attack the supply chain and then affect tons of end users is way more exciting for an attacker than it is to say like, oh, I'm going to individually target all these different groups. I mean, SolarWinds is like the big one I think that scared a ton of people. There's been a lot of retrospectives done for that. But yeah, it's something that a lot of people didn't really think about. I think about it all the time now. So I started this position about a year and a half ago. I did other product security stuff before, but yeah, it's definitely interesting. It's a good mix of where does security blend with engineering culture,
Mhm.
and how do you make that work together in a way that gets you, I don't know, a trustworthy supply chain, right? Which we can go on more about what that actually means.
Yeah, and I strongly suspect that while there are many tools, there are many things that you can use to make that easier and all of those things. It's probably a little fuzzy, a lot like DevOps. Everybody says, "Oh, DevOps, do the DevOps, make the DevOps." You want to adopt DevOps, but there's no SKU that you can go out and purchase a DevOps. Right? You
Hmm.
can't go to your hardware vendor and say, I want a system that can do 87,000 DevOps. So I think a supply chain, and especially securing a supply chain is going to be very, specific to not just the application, but the organization, the team, the
Hmm.
folks who are on there and how they think and how they behave. So I'm
Hmm.
excited for the conversation. So before we get started, let's do top of mind topics. Let's talk about some things that have been happening in the world of Kubernetes and OpenShift. So as a reminder, this is one of the office hours series of live streams here with Red Hat Live Streaming. So what that means is that we are here to answer any questions that you have about OpenShift, about Kubernetes, about all of the things, and we will do our best to answer those here on the stream. Whether or not they are related to today's topic or not, we'll help as best as we can. If we don't know the answers, and a lot of times, either Johnny or I or whichever one of us isn't running our mouth at the time, we're trying to reach out to people internally, trying to find answers if we don't know off the top of our head. If we can't get those answers, then we'll be sure to follow up. So, check us out next week, or, sometimes we'll post blog posts, check us on social media, all of those places. You can always reach out, or excuse me, you can always, we'll follow up on those things. Additionally, if you are not watching us live, so first, thank you for watching us, watching the replay. But if you're not watching us live, you can reach out to us with any questions that you have at any time. So you're welcome to reach to me, andrew.sullivan@redhat.com, or on social media, I am Practical Andrew. So whether you're on Twitter or Reddit or all of the other things and places and all of that, you can reach out to me at any time, and I'll do my best to get back to you. You can also reach out to Johnny, Jonny, at redhat.com, or JRockTX, because he's in Texas. JRockTX on TX1, right?
TX1. Yep.
Yeah, on all the social medias. So, top of mind topics. Let's see here. Where's my notes document? Let's see, a couple of things to talk about here. So the first one is a blog post. Let me share my screen here. Oh, not add source. I do that every single time. I click the plus instead of clicking the share window sign. All right. So the first one I'll talk about here is the agent-based installer. So the agent-based installer, we talked about it during the What's New session for OpenShift 4.11. And we had a couple of people reach out through their account teams, a couple of other folks internally that were asking, how do I use this thing? If we look at the slide, so if we go to red.ht/next and new, if we look at the slide down here, and I think I can click on this. I thought I could click on that and it would open it up. Apparently I'm slide impaired today. Anyways, if we go through here long enough, we'll find the thing, and it actually has here, you can go through and use this thing. Here we go, agent-based installer, and it has this example over here, and the example shows like OpenShift install agent command. But if you use any of the OpenShift install commands, so OpenShift, I'm using OpenShift install 4.11.2, there is no agent command, right? So it turns out that while yes, it is available, you have to go through a bit of a process today to actually get access to that command. So Benchmouse, who is a peer of mine over on the tech marketing team, wrote this blog post in conjunction with a couple of other folks in product management and engineering on how to go through and actually build the installer, which is only a temporary thing. In the future, you won't need to build it. It'll just be a part of the installer. And walk through and actually use the agent-based installer. So why is this important? So getting the first cluster up, especially in a disconnected environment, can be hard. So the agent-based installer, effectively, what it does is it creates, so I'm scrolling through here, right? You provide it the standard, install config file. You pass it a agent config file, which has, among other things, network configuration information, etc. It merges those things together and creates this agent.iso. And then you basically boot each one of the nodes to that ISO. And the nodes figure out who they are and who they need to talk to and basically deploy a cluster. Right? So it takes care of all of that initial stuff. You no longer have to do the normal, host the ignition config files on a web server and pull down CoreOS and deploy CoreOS and point it at the ignition config and set up network config and all that other stuff. It all handles it within this agent-based installer. So really, really significantly simplified process of deploying, especially that first cluster inside. So if this is something that's interesting to you, if you're willing to, get, I'll say a little dirty in the process here, build the customized OpenShift install with the agent inside of there, or wait. I don't know precisely when it'll be available, but I think they're hoping it'll be relatively soon. I say that with the standard asterisks, right? The standard disclaimers apply of, future plans and timelines may change. But the goal being, try it out if that's something that's interesting to you. One of the things that they talk about here up at the top, I'll quit scrolling because I know it can be confusing to keep up with, but one of the things that they talk about at the top is, especially in a disconnected environment, standing up that first hub cluster where you install ACM and ACS and all the other things that you need in order to then go out and deploy all the rest of your clusters inside of that environment. So I thought it was a really cool blog post. Ben and company did a great job walking through all the things that you need here. Give it a try. You can deploy. Ben's example here does a 3-node compact cluster, and he deploys it into virtual machines, and it goes through. And at the end of the day, you've got a regular old cluster running inside of there.
That'll be cool when it's ready, or even maybe before then to have them come on and do the demo of it and let everybody see it. Because I think I was reading the blog yesterday. I was like, man, this is pretty cool. My friend Lester turned me on to this, and I was like, oh man, this is awesome.
Yeah, I've been following it internally for a while. They used to have what was their acronym? It was like Billy or something like that, BILLI. So they internally, they have a whole internal only blog that the engineering folks have been publishing. So I've been following their progress, and seeing this come to fruition is really cool. Only benign but serious software supply chain snafu I can think of is the DBN SSH issue from 2008. I don't remember that one. That was a while ago. I'm getting old. My memory's not keeping up.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to go back and look that one up. Yeah, when Emmy was first talking about it, the one that kind of kept popping up in my mind was the ISO from Mint, Linux Mint back in the day, and I just remember that because like I'd switched from Ubuntu over to Mint, and then it was just before that, I think. So I was like, oh man, I got lucky and missed it, Because I was so arrogant back in the day where I was like, it's Linux, you don't need a virus scanner, there's no malware in Linux.
Yeah, I speaking of, I just saw an article the other day about how malware attacks and ransomware attacks on Linux servers have been increasing pretty significantly over the last year as well. So
yeah, it's getting hairy out there.
It's again, security. Turns out it's a big deal. Who knew? He says tongue in cheek.
Indeed.
Let's see. So if anybody has any questions on that, Johnny, to your point, we should probably bring them on. I'm trying to remember. We've got shows out through like mid-October now. So for anybody who isn't subscribed, please do click the subscribe button on whatever platform you're on. We've got streams on all kinds of topics all the way out through at least mid-October at this point. I think coming up is like how to control and how to optimize pod scheduling using eviction, descheduler, and all of those things. So that'll be a fun one.
Oh yeah.
Among other things, I don't have the list in front of me at the moment, but if you keep an eye on either through subscribing to the channel or if you go to red.ht/livestream, you'll land at the page there. It has a calendar. You can subscribe to the calendar, and then you can see all of the stuff that we've got going on. And we do our best to keep that updated. Let's see, what's next? Let's see. This is one that I think you had brought up, Johnny.
Yeah, so if you remember, I don't remember the episode number, but we had brought Christina, I'm so sorry, Christina Karikadu, onto the show, and she was talking about, some of the different reasons why, or some of the different workflows with OpenShift developers and administrators and stuff like that. And so she's been really involved with the cost management aspect of OpenShift, and so she's written a couple of blogs, and so she just posted version 2 or part 2 of her cost management for OpenShift blog, and it's out on the blog.openshift.com website, and I'll post the link right here. But give it a read, and maybe we can bring Christina back on and have her, talk through this again. I think that she's a really good guest, and she'd probably, despise coming back, but she might want to. Who knows?
Yeah, I'm digging back through our shows here, trying to figure out which one that she was on. Episode 66. What's funny is she was on, or she joined us, not to talk about cost management, even though that's like what she's kind of best known for, but because of the blog post that she did around questions that administrators should ask their developers.
Yeah, exactly.
So yeah, she did that blog post, and here, I think I found the link here. Yes, I am sure I want to leave YouTube. Yeah, this was the blog post where we talked to her and brought her on the stream. So I know this cost management one is why did I leave? Why was that saying leave YouTube? That was weird. I wasn't even on YouTube.
You've made it angry.
I know. So, anyways, Christina, well known for cost management. I think that cost management is a underutilized and largely unknown feature for many folks, especially if you're using a hyperscaler. It's super easy to connect those accounts in there, and then you can go through and you can really get a lot of detailed information about exactly what's going on in your clusters and what's costing you money. Showback is one thing. Chargeback is another, and to me, showback has always been more valuable because you can use it as a to be a little blunt, pun intended, as a stick to ensure that folks are doing the right thing, right?
Yep, exactly.
Yvonne, is the agent installer something we're going to see with OKD? I would think so. I don't know why they wouldn't. You could probably follow more or less the same instructions that you find in that blog post to build the OKD installer. I think because it's a core part of the installer, it should be a part of OKD as well. What I don't know, ACM is where things get a little strange because ACM is a couple of different components that are combined together to make up ACM, right? Multi-cluster engine and the Stolostron. I can never remember their repo, but like the Stolostron interface and all that other stuff inside of there. But yeah, definitely check out OKD and the installer there. Also, don't forget, if you're just wanting to test with it and experiment with it, you can, through a developer entitlement, you can have access to 16 OpenShift entitlements that you can use for non-production single-user clusters. So if you just want to deploy clusters, get familiar with agent-based installer, see if it does your thing, you can do that. I also, again, poking at OpenShift proper licenses, you can also use assisted installer. Assisted installer is another one that makes that whole process much easier. All right, let's talk about Hello 0%. Let's talk about software supply chain and software supply chain security. So I'm going to unshare my screen. So Emmy, I'd like to ask you a couple of questions just to kind of set the stage or define the problem, if you will. One, from your perspective, and you are certainly the expert here, how do you define or what do you consider to be a software supply chain? Is it literally like, as an engineer, as a developer, when I write my Python script and I include a library, right? That library is part of my supply chain, but it goes beyond that, right?
It does, yeah. So analogies are fun and I enjoy them. So another analogy for you is the water treatment facility. So especially because we're open source, we have, think of like a mountain lake, right? And you as a person can go to that mountain lake and drink directly from that lake if you'd like, but we wouldn't recommend it. You might get sick, right? So we have a water treatment facility that pulls all of that water in, which is the code, right? So we pull in an open source code, we treat it, we make it usable, better, more secure, more trustworthy. All of the pipes in our water treatment facility are what we consider the software supply chain. So everything that the water or the code moves through is part of the supply chain. Every system, tool, piece of infrastructure, all of the additional components that you add in to make the code work correctly, libraries, things like that. There's a lot of different layers to that supply chain. And then there's pieces of it that are I would say the inside of the pipes. And so if you have lead on the inside of the pipes, it's going to seep into your water. So you want to make sure that's not there. And so there's things that you do throughout your productization process to that are part of the supply chain as well. So it's it's a kind of beautiful mix of infrastructure, I would say, like servers and all those things, and then what you're actually putting into the code to make the code work correctly for your offering. And
I'll
all of that needs to be protected.
yeah, so it's funny because I had never really thought that thoroughly about it before. Of like you said, like the servers that things are running on. Of it's one thing to say I got this container image, right, and I tested, I validated, I am confident that it is a secure container image. But
Mhm.
if the server that's hosting that, that hosting your registry is compromised, then you could have something injected after you've done that. Like
Yeah.
it's you said this beautiful thing to me. It's terrifying,
Mhm.
and slightly intimidating of just the scope of all of that. So I say that not to discourage anyone or not to scare anyone, but to me, like I very naively, you heard me start this conversation of, oh yeah, I include some libraries and I just want to test and I want to validate that those libraries
Mhm.
are coming, that they are the libraries that I expect them to be, that have what I expect them to be inside of it. But no, it's so much more than that.
Mhm. Right. Yeah. It's I would say terrifying is a good word for it, but I would say if a squeaky wheel is going to get the grease, I'm glad it's terrifying because it's an issue. So, um yeah, I don't know. I think that there's been a lot of talk, and I don't know if it's just because I'm exposed to it in my role, like it's kind of in my face, but like the U.S. president put out an executive order in cybersecurity last year. A huge portion of it was dedicated to supply chain, and the reason is because, I mean, it's specifically for government entities, right? But he wants to make sure that the intent was to make sure that like just because you purchase something doesn't mean you should have to innately entrust the supply chain of that thing. Now, Red Hat's unique because the things we create go into someone else's supply chain. And so it's like supply chains within supply chains, right?
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
if anything compromises our supply chains, it could potentially compromise someone else's supply chains, and you can have this multi-layered impact. And I think in general, there's so much software out there that a user uh, interacts with. There's so much code that we have to at some point just trust that what we're using is safe to use or it's trustworthy. Um, we can't personally check all of it, but so now there's new things coming out like SLSA is I think it's called the software levels. I keep forgetting it.
I always hear
Of
it called salsa.
supply
Salsa.
chain levels of software artifacts. Yeah, SALSA, and that's a framework that is supported by OpenSSF, and it's designed to help consumers understand what's going on in the supply chain of those things that they're purchasing. So it's the attestation of it is created and can be packaged with the product that's going out, and so it's not a simple, hey, here's a vendor risk assessment, and we want you to answer a few questions and tell us if you do pen tests on your supply chain, but it's actual attestation that shows and has signed
Hmm.
um, like evidence that these things are being done. So I think that's going to be helpful when it starts getting implemented for consumers. It's helpful for us because we want to make sure that our consumers are protected and that they have a trustworthy software that they can rely on. So, um,
So can I think it's take a step up and or
mhm,
maybe down and ask like what hypothetically what does a secure software supply chain look like? And I think, as I just maybe alarmingly said, of there's a lot of parts of that. And I think if we, it starts at certainly the humans that are,
mhm,
writing code, and the things that the decisions that they make, and making sure that they are making good security conscious decisions,
mhm,
um, using tools, libraries, resources that are known to be trusted,
right,
relying on administrator teams, to do things like make sure the network is secure, make sure the servers are secure, make sure that, in the case of OpenShift, we're implementing a secure platform to do that software development. So our builds, our pipelines, all of those things that we as administrators care for and love, and and attend to, and all those things. It's not an individual. It's not even a single team. It's
Mhm.
everyone in sort of every part of the stack.
Right. And so there's a couple things that I think we need to touch on. One is that nothing is ever secure unless it's like not alive at all, right? Like it needs to be completely disconnected from the internet in every way and shut down and never used again. That's the only way it's going to be completely secure. So thinking about security, about it's not if, it's when, is a really good place to start. And when an attack happens, are you able to contain it? Are you able to know what happened so that the amount of damage is minimized? And so you're looking at risk, and risk is really, really important with any security efforts at all. A lot of times I think security has been boiled down to check the box exercises of, hey, you need to meet this criteria over here. Hey, it's just another thing security is asking you to do. And when you get into that mindset, and when security practitioners get into this kind of like security purity mindset of like everything has to be perfect all the time, because we're trying to secure the network or secure our product, you're going to lose everybody along the way, because everyone had all of and I'm speaking from the perspective of engineering, right? So engineers, when you're creating products, you have your own priorities, right? It's going to be features. It's going to be what your VP says you need to put out now. And a lot of times that means that you have to do things quickly. Might mean like standing some, depending on the organization you're a part of, might mean standing up an instance that is like some random Jenkins instance, right? Like, oh, and it has to be compatible, so I need to go back a couple versions. Doing things like that and those kind of practices are what, when we start to open up these holes in our supply chain. So it's changing the way that we look at engineering in general, to be security minded. I think a couple years ago, 5 years ago, the terminology like, oh, shift left with security. It's cheaper if you do security earlier on, shift left with it. Yes, but it's not about shifting left with security. It's about baking security in, which has been like kind of the new phrase that people say now. And what that means is that you're security minded throughout all of it, that everyone is a security practitioner. That just means that you're doing basic things like, if you're going to stand up a system, you don't have shared root credentials. Like, we all know, we found that out in second grade that that's a bad idea, right? Like that's not anything new. So just don't do the things that you know are really bad. That's a really good place to start. And that's where it is. Like, right, okay, I'm standing this up. Can I do this in a way like, it probably should be on SSO. Let me like make sure that I have multi-factor authentication. Okay, I have this new system up. I need to make sure I write a ticket tomorrow when I get to it to make sure that this is logging to Splunk, so that we can have all the logs for everything that's going on here. So if something happens, they can figure out where it originated from and they can trigger on alerts, right? So it's just this idea that security is not giving you a bunch of tasks. Your local like security team is not giving you a bunch of tasks to work on. That system or that tool or whatever you decided to incorporate into your productization process has security requirements in it, because of the way that it's set up, because of the access that it has, maybe if it's write access versus read access. There's just different security requirements there. And knowing and fully understanding as an administrator what those security requirements are, so that you can say, hey, I can't stand this up because I don't have the capacity to maintain this. So thinking about maintenance in the future, how often do we think about maintenance? I mean, it's so common. Like, I'm going to write up this code. It's going to be so fun, but no one's going to maintain it. And it's just going to be some tool that lives on in infamy, right? And is never looked at because no one wants to be the maintainer of it. And then, right, a security state of mind, exactly. And so I don't think it needs to be overwhelming. It just needs to be a part of the way we do things. Like, hey, every morning I make my bed and I like check to see if any dirty underwear got thrown under my bed and I move that out of the way. And if you're constantly doing that, it's so much easier than trying to do it on the back end when this tidal wave of requirements is hitting you. Because what we have to understand is that technology rapidly changes, right? We all know it rapidly changes, and security changes like 10 times faster. For every new technology that we have a whole like boatload. Every single step, we have a whole boatload of different security requirements, because now you've just opened up Pandora's box for being able to get into it in a different way.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're behind on the current security requirements, you can sure bet that in a month, when something else comes out, you're going to be well behind then, and you're not going to be
Yeah.
able to catch up.
It's funny because I'm sitting here and I'm thinking of similar experiences. The dirty room analogy that we keep going back to, right? Is it easier to clean as you go, or at the end of the month when you've got you're knee deep in filth as the owner of a teenager and a preteen? I know how that is, and I very deliberately said owner, by the way. It's not fun, it's not glamorous, but it's necessary. And one of the I remember back to very early in my career when I was racking and stacking servers. And you go and shove the servers in the rack, and then you go around behind and you start plugging in cables. And it's so easy to just plug everything in and let it droop and not organize it at all and move on to the next rack and go on. And you pay for that, right? Because sure enough,
Mhm.
something goes bad, something goes wrong. You got to pull that thing out. Well, now I got to, lift 30 pounds of cables out of the way so that I can find the right one and unplug it. And oh man, I really hope that was the right one, type of thing. And, or you could just not be lazy and actually, organize things and actually do it correctly the first time, so that in the future, like you said, software maintenance, you don't want to take on something that you can't maintain, that you can't, you know, uh, um, support going forward. Then,
Mhm.
basically you're making making life easier for your future self. Past Andrew's enough of a jerk. I don't need to make it any harder for future Andrew than necessary.
Yeah.
So yeah, and it's funny you also brought up that I've the not taking on things that you can't support. There was recently a conversation about, like, if there's a community operator, for example, OpenShift operators, all those things, community operator. Well, what's the criteria for it becoming productized and becoming supported by Red Hat? Well, it has almost nothing to do with code quality or functionality or popularity or any of those other things. Rather, it's, do we have the engineering bandwidth to just
Mhm.
do the things that need to happen with any software product, to maintain it, to secure it, to do all of those things. It all requires engineering time. It requires people to sit at keyboards and do the thing that I hope they love to do, which is write code. So even if it's adopted by everyone, if we don't have that
Mhm.
throughput, we can't take on maintenance, support of another thing.
Well, and I think too, is coming from the perspective of being a leader, I think it's a leader's responsibility in those situations to understand what you're asking, to try to understand what you're asking. If you're asking for a new feature development that's going to require a new tool, do you have the capacity on your team? Are you relying on your administrators to be able to say, hey, this is actually like what the capacity we would need in order to do this step? Are you listening to them when they say those things? um, we have this idea in Red Hat of freedom and accountability, right? That you have to weigh one with the other, and I think that's wonderful, and I hope all groups are doing that. um, the accountability piece has to be there, though, and it's accountability for leadership to know and understand that their requests always have a trickle,
Yeah.
like a continuous thing that they're going to have to support. And I do wonder how often an administrator or an engineer is working on a piece of it, and they are told by their leadership, hey, you need to get this out tomorrow, and they go, okay, that's fine, I'll just do what I need to do, I don't want to cause problems. And those little asks result, like, really ultimately come out to big problems. And so it's a cultural change, it's a leadership change, understanding the implications of what your ask is and fully recognizing it. And this is where I was trying to start talking about risk, right? What's the risk versus reward, and understanding that risk. So, like, if you're going to put something up and it can't be put onto your company's SSO, have you considered the extent to which you can reach that tool and what it would mean to get it on there? What's the actual like cost? And you can break it all down into numbers and say like it's going to cost me this much in engineering hours, and I only have this much to spare. Like, but doing that full analysis of the risk versus like the security risk that you're saying you're going to accept as a leader, by not doing something with security, to say like, yeah, if anything happens, I'm willing to put my neck on the line and say I accepted this risk because I didn't have this capacity to do it and I made this decision, right? But I think a lot of times folks go into it blind, and that blindness can get people in trouble. It can get companies in trouble. It can get customers in trouble later down the road. So yeah, I think in the chat it was talking about enforcing a security mindset. Absolutely. Enforcing I would say a risk, looking at risk. There's moving away from that whole like check the box idea and towards like what could happen, what might happen, what's the impact. There's so many ways you can measure that. You can measure risk, you could measure severity, you could measure likelihood. Like there are actual ways to go about measuring that. With different people have different opinions about the mechanisms for doing that, but we won't go down that road.
And I think as engineers on both sides, right? You have security engineers and then like our regular engineers, right? I think as they grow and become smarter, the security engineers go from the default of no, if they go from being no engineers to, okay, let's see how this is going to impact. And then they can help measure risk. And then that helps build that story back up to the leadership team where it's like, hey, look, this is what we're going to do, or this is why we're not going to implement this feature because of everything that you just said, right? And then that leader can actually make a decision and either with action do something or through inaction do something, right? And then measure that risk and say, hey, this is the thing. Because back in the day, 100 years ago when Andrew and I worked together, like our security team, they were straight up no engineers, and so it was the default was how can I get to know fast, and when you're developing something and you're trying to build something, it's such an off-putting conversation to have when it's the conversation can't even start because they don't even want to dip their toe in the water to kind of get an idea of what capability might come out of it.
Right.
Yeah. When I first started talking about dynamic provisioning with storage and stuff like that, I used to have conversations with storage admins because a lot of times, and I'll pick on storage admins because I was one for many, many years. Our default response is, at best, it's, I'm going to cut your request by 50%, probably more like 75%. But most of the time it was probably no, or why do you need that? Because I don't think you actually need that. And so, improv has this thing, if you've ever tried or done an improv class or anything like that, of you always roll with the situation, and you apply the same thing with like Alzheimer's, right? If anybody in your family has ever had Alzheimer's and you interact with them, my grandmother did, and spent a lot of time with her, and it's every day, every moment is basically yes, and you just take it and you roll with it. And applying that same, like you were saying, Johnny, of getting away from a default of no, how quickly can I get to no, to, okay, I recognize that this is a valid request, that this is a valid need. So let's work together to get to the best endpoint that we can, type of thing.
Mm-hmm.
So it's very much a mindset and a joint thing, right? Not a competitive thing, not a us against them thing. It's a we have to work together, and that means compromise on both sides. Yeah, that's why I was asked for 12 terabytes when I only need one. Yeah, I very distinctly remember as I was a storage administrator, and they asked me, well, how much storage do we need for next year? Because I was collecting a bunch of metrics and doing a bunch of projections and all this other stuff. So I was pretty confident that we would need to grow by about 1.5 petabytes in the next 12 months. So that's what I submitted. And it went up one level and turned into 4, and it went up another level and turned into 8, and it went up another level and turned into 12, and it reached the finance guy who said, well, you'll get 2. And at that point, we had more than enough storage for the next year. And so, yeah, to your point, Christian, yeah, it's if somebody at any point in time had come back and said, can you prove this? Like, is this the real valid actual request? Then yes, I can absolutely work with that. But instead, we all make assumptions. Let's see, I'm catching up on chat here a little bit.
There's another piece too that I didn't really, when we're talking about like what is the software supply chain, there's a couple layers to it that I brushed over, but I think it is important to like dive down a little bit on. If you look at the SALSA requirements, it's source, build, provenance, and there's some other requirements in there, but those are the big ones, right? So that is what is in your product that contributes to the way that it functions, right? And is that from a secure place? Has it been your whole package been signed? Is that viewable? Is it testable?
Mhm.
And then the other side is the hardening piece, which are more kind of infosec-ish requirements, like as you think of them, of are you securing and hardening the actual tools and infrastructure? So it's kind of this multifaceted thing that I think that sometimes folks like either focus on one or the other. They'll be like, oh, SBOMs, like let's only talk about SBOMs. Like, yes, but there's a whole other side to it, like that you also need to focus on. So yeah, I think that's just a clarification I wanted to kind of throw in there, that there are kind of like two directions, I would say, that you want to
Yeah.
look at it from.
Yeah, no, it's important. So I know when we were chatting beforehand, I think everybody but me, all like you, Johnny, and Stephanie all have meetings at the top of the hour. So I want to be cognizant of time, so that way we don't go over our time today. So for our audience, if you have any questions, anything that we haven't talked about, any other chat or points that you'd like to make, please don't hesitate. Be sure to send those over to us. Whatever platform you're on, YouTube, Twitch, etc., it all gets aggregated together, and we see it here in our client. Right answer is that the architecture needs to be flexible enough to allow growth well beyond your current needs. Yes, our hope none. Absolutely, and it's one of those things that. I think in 2022, many of us vendors have figured out, being extremely rigid or offering only one way of doing something, uh, and more importantly, not giving the ability to change it after the fact, just needlessly makes life hard for everyone, right? So, storage is one of those last bastions of what I'll say is difficulty. We've worked around it in many ways. Virtualization being a perfect example. Hey, I'm using XYZ storage vendor. I can't do a life cycle in place, so therefore I do storage live migration and I move everything over to the old one, or the new one rather. So, but yeah. So, anyways, back. What was I saying? Anybody who is watching us, please feel free to submit any comments. If you're not watching us live, again, please feel free to reach out via social media at PracticalAndrew, at JRockTX1. Or email andrew.sullivan@redhat.com or johnny@redhat.com. I really have enjoyed this conversation, Emmy. I feel like we've been, it took us a little while to coordinate everything and get everybody together and all that other stuff. But to me, this is one of those things that it's super foundational. And in our day-to-day jobs, we tend to forget about it. And I really, in light of, and let me gesture broadly, everything that's going on in the security world, and sort of the, if you look at Slashdot, or you look at uh, 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 Reddit, Y Combinator, right? All of these different news aggregator sites. I learned a new one recently, Brutalist.report, which like aggregates all of the aggregators together.
Nice.
Yeah. Anyway, so like there's constant flow of security issues. So we of course have to take that very seriously, as a vendor as well as a customer, right? Red Hat is a customer,
Mhm.
folks, and for all the folks in our audience, you're probably in the same boat, right? You produce something that your customers use. We don't do business for the sake of doing business, right? We all produce something, we sell something, we provide a service, whatever it is. So I really like that we took this opportunity to remind folks of be security conscious at every step of the way. And that's not just a developer thing. It's not just the people who are writing code. And when we say software supply chain security, it's not just those libraries. It's not just, am I using the right npm, endpoint? Am I using the right Quay registry mirror, right? Or whatever that happens to be. It's the little day-to-day things like following security best practices, all those things that we've put
Mm-hmm.
into the various what IBM calls them red books, but like the OpenShift security guides that Kirsten Newcomer and team produced not long ago.
Mm-hmm.
I've got a link for that somewhere that we'll post here in a second. So it's sort of everyday things that we all know we should do. It's not being lazy. It's not procrastinating. It's doing the things that we know we should be doing, and we just put off.
Mm-hmm.
How many security vulnerabilities, right, from Microsoft, Google with Chrome, right, all these other things. It's that was patched 2 years ago. Just nobody applied the patch. I'll make a plug for Darknet Diaries. Great podcasts that you can find. I love listening to Darknet Diaries when I'm driving to and from the office, the tower here in Raleigh. And because it's almost every time, if it's not a social engineering episode, almost every time it's, I found this vulnerability, this exploit that had been there for years and nobody did anything about it.
Yeah.
Again, all right. I'll stop running my mouth. Stephanie, this is your last episode with us. Thank you so much for the 50, 60 episodes, however long you've been with us. It's been amazing. You've helped us in countless and innumerable ways. If I'm being honest, I'm a little bit terrified of how things are going to go from here on out. But we'll persevere. And apologies to our audience for any roughness that we have over the coming weeks as Johnny and I figure out the post Stephanie worlds. Emmy, thank you for joining us again. Really do appreciate your time and really just taking the time to come and have a conversation with us. And with that, I'll hush.
I will say there redhat.com, the blogs, keep an eye out for what product security is putting out. We do put a lot of stuff out about what we do internally, how we handle different vulnerabilities. So if you're curious about what's happening, we do put stuff out there, try to communicate with our customers, and also how we're involved in the industry, right? So we're in a bunch of different forums as well to make sure that our best practices are communicated out, that they're adopted externally, and that we're creating solutions that really help our customers. So just a little plug there. If you're going to follow any of the blogs, there's a product security group blog. I think probably once a month minimum we put something out.
Good to know. I think I've got it in my feed reader, so good. I need to actually go and look at my feed reader every once in a while. Stephanie, Johnny,
it's been a pleasure doing the show. I love it. I'll be back. You're welcome to reach out to me for support anytime. And this is the easiest thing I've done. So
you're being very kind. I know Johnny and I aren't easy.
Nice.
we're both
I figured it out after over a year and a half. I figured it out, I guess.
We're both squirrels on ADD that have OD'd on caffeine. So
indeed, yes.
Johnny, last words, please.
Yeah, thank you, Emmy. I really appreciate your time, and I know we just scratched the surface on this subject, but hopefully, as it's going to keep progressing, we're going to keep learning more and more. So hopefully, you'll want to come back and talk to us, 6 months from now or next week or whatever about some of the new stuff that we find. Stephanie, you're awesome. Thank you so much for everything, and we appreciate you. And so to everybody else that's listening or watching, make sure you like and subscribe on whatever platform you're using, and then we'll see you next week. Thank you, Andrew.